Hello everybody, my name is Nootmad and welcome to another episode of the Ultimate Amon Guide series. And this time around we're going to be discussing the best shields for Amon so far in the game currently. So the meta for Amon is going to consistently evolve and change over time goes on, so while this video may potentially get outdated in the future once we discover new interactions and new gear gets released, I still want to make a guide now just to help new and existing Amon mains figure out what shields are worth farming for, why they're good, and what sort of builds you can put together using them. I also have a written guide on mobalytics as well, so if you prefer that over videos, feel free to check that out. I'll put that in the description down below. And also, as always, if you guys want to see anything specifically from the Ultimate Amon Guide series, or want me to focus on something in particular, let me know in the comments and I'll see what I can do about that. So, all the shields that I'm talking about today have a heavy focus on dishing out damage and supplementing the overall DPS capability for your Amon builds. So while there are other shields in the game that have a heavier focus on survivability and being, well, a shield, the shields I want to talk about in this video are going to be all about what I would consider augments and a means to increase the damage potential for your builds. So, the first shield we're going to talk about is a good old Firework Shield. It's a legendary shield that can drop from more or less the very first boss you fight in the game, Splash Zone, over in the Fade Fields. The special effect for this shield will make it clear as to why it's so useful. On kill, the Firework Shield will spawn a bundle of homing missiles that track and detonate on enemies. Now, not only is it easily farmable and obtainable in the early game, but also scales quite nicely into the end game as well, and is fully capable of killing trash mobs on their own and finishing off other low health enemies. Much like any shield in the game, it can roll with its own firmware, and the choice you have is entirely dependent on the build you end up running. Now, while this shield doesn't provide a whole lot of direct synergies, unlike some other shields I'll talk about soon, what makes the shield so useful is how easily it can just be slotted onto any other build for a little extra damage and mobbing capabilities. So for example, a build like my Swiss Army Knife Amon, who I'll have a link to the video in the top right now, will work best with a shield like this due to its versatility and its lower levels of gear reliance to get optimal results. The next shield worth talking about is the Heavyweight Armor Shield. Yet another legendary shield that you can get for yourself from the vile prototype mini-boss in Lictor's Blacksite and Terminus range. The Heavyweight special effect very heavily leans itself into a build that relies on melee damage, as your special effect consumes an armor segment on melee hit and provides a 100% bonus to true melee damage, and 50% to other melee sources. And to add to this further, when the Heavyweight is empty, you get a flat 50% bonus to melee damage. This special effect can be procced from any melee related attack and not just Amon's default melee strike. So things like the Forge Whips in Amon's Vengeance tree and things like that get the bonuses. From an Amon specific point of view, the Heavyweight Shield allows additional melee damage scaling if skill points are sunk into other areas of his tree and a build is lacking direct buffs to melee damage from a skill point perspective, and the Heavyweight can sort of give you a little band-aid fix for that. On the flip side, the Heavyweight can act as a way to elevate any melee focus build from Amon even further. But let's peel back the layers and look into some deeper synergies. A Vengeance focused build using the Shadowrite cast mod can make your Forge Whips, which typically deal ordnance and action skill damage, can now also scale with melee damage as well once you slot in the Shadowrite comp. The implication of this: your Forge Whips will now benefit from your standard melee skill bonuses in Amon's trees, but will now get additional melee damage bonuses from the Heavyweight Shield as well. And what does this mean? You now get a Forge Whip that can dip into 3 different damage sources: Ordnance, action skill, and melee. And the Heavyweight Shield plays into a playstyle like this perfectly. In fact, for a Shadowrite Forge Wave build, the Heavyweight is one of the best shields you can equip for a build like that. And these are the synergies you should be looking for when making your Amon builds. Looking for ways to add in additional damage scaling sources is how you elevate an average Amon build to a great one. The Protean Cell is the next shield on the list and is obtainable from the Bio Bulkhead boss in the Fade Fields. The Protean Cell is a very interesting shield and can lend itself towards a build that is looking to increase shock damage, or add in an extra elemental damage source in the form of shock. The Protean Cell is an energy shield that upon slamming the ground starts to drain your shields, but in turn gives you 40% bonus shock damage. Now, a good friend Girthquake made a build exactly like this focusing on the shield, and I'll link his build in the top right as well and the description down below. But he found that the bonus damage applies to not just the bullets you fire, but also your dots as well, which makes it a huge bonus to massively increasing your elemental damage. Now, while the What's for Dinner shield, which we'll talk about soon, gives a persistent shock damage bonus, it's only applied to the bullets you fired and nothing else. This makes the Protean Cell a more high risk, high reward type of shield. And why is there a risk? Well, the Protean Cell basically drains your entire shield capacity in order to give you the massive shock damage buff. And in this game, having no shield makes you a prime target for every mob in the game. And you haven't invested in significant amounts of lifesteal or health regeneration, or a skill like Forged in Steel, which makes you invincible after activating your Forge skill temporarily, you'll die very, very quickly. But in saying that, that's not to say that this shield isn't good. In fact, it's far from it. It's one of the best boss killing shields that Amon has access to. The global damage buff that this shield provides is significant, as some of Amon's strongest builds revolves around dot damage. So when you add a shield into the mix that can apply bonus damage to all dots that Amon could throw out, you get a very spicy combination. Speaking of what's for dinner, that's next up on the list. The watts can be obtained from Origo, who is a primordial guardian for the Terminus range vault. Like I briefly touched on just then, the special effect for the what's for dinner is two things. The first effect is that on hit, it has a chance to drop a booster that can provide a small amount of overshield, and the second effect is much more meaty. When an overshield is active, the watts gives you a 25% bonus shock damage to your projectiles. Now, while this may seem a bit underwhelming in comparison to the Protean Cell shield we just spoke about before, the watts fills in a different requirement, one for mobbing. Because the watts provides overshield and then gives you bonus shock damage, it's significantly more reliable for mobbing as opposed to the Protean, which drains its shields constantly. For an optimal configuration, swapping between the watts and the Protean depending on the situation may end up being your best choice, but once again, this is all contingent on the build you're running. For a build focused on mobbing, you'll be hard pressed to find a use case with a Protean where you can just equip the watts and spec into a skeleton that provides overshielded Amon's trees. Thankfully, you have a few choices, and each tree has its own overshield generation. All the triggers for these skills are easily achievable, and because all these overshield bonuses are percentage based on the damage you end up dealing, even a single point or two is enough to provide you with constant overshield to keep the bonus shock damage from the watts active at all times. And finally, we have the Super Soldier Shield, a legendary returning from BL3 with more or less the same effect. This time around, it's a dedicated drop from Vile Lictor, and a special effect is that when the energy shield is full, you get increased fire rate, movement speed, and ammo regen. This ammo regen also applies to your ordnance as well, making it incredibly synergistic with a heavy ordnance focused build. As another added bonus, when the Super Soldier fills to max capacity, you get an overshield as well, which can add to your overall survivability. Now, while the ammo regen is very useful and should not be underestimated, the movement speed is also quite synergistic with Amon. Reason being is that it can directly add to the bullet train specialization, which provides gun damage based on how fast you're moving. This bullet train gun damage bonus can then feed into other specializations like I am a gun and bear arms, which gives skill damage and melee damage accordingly, both of which are ideal stats for Amon builds depending on the build that you're running. And some nice scaling can be obtained from Super Soldier for very little effort. Speccing into skills like shield recharge rate and having passive stats on your gear that do the same can help maintain that constant movement speed bonus, which in turn ties into giving Amon additional melee damage, ordnance damage, and action skill damage, assuming you pick up all the relevant specializations. But that rounds out the list for what I think are the 5 most optimal shields from a damage perspective for your Amon builds. Having one of each will provide you with massive utility and build crafting potential, which at the end of the day is what we all want. The core concept I want you guys to take away from this is the idea of looking deeper into things. Surface level synergies are not enough to make a highly impactful Amon build. Look into deeper synergies, like for example the movement speed buff from Super Soldier Shield giving you melee damage bonuses as a result, or combining the Heavyweight Shield and a Shadowrat class mod to make a hard hitting Forge build. Think that these are what gives your builds that extra punch that they need. With all that said and done, hope you guys found something useful out of it. If you aren't already, consider subscribing and liking the video, and let me know down in the comments below what you want to see next. Take care, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. See ya.